Timing of the sewing machine is a very important part of how the stitch is formed in the quilting machine. So to begin with, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and take the component parts off so that we can get in and see the different applications. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and take the throat plate off, and so we have two separate screws that we're going to loosen. So we're going to take these off. So as we finish taking the last screw off, the throat plate just comes right off. And with the throat plate off, then we can see the whole hook assembly in underneath the throat plate itself. Now what we're going to do also is we're going to show you how to adjust the needle bar height. So we're going to need to take the 3 screws off for the cover plate. So we have one screw that's going to be in here, we have one screw here, and one screw here. So all 3 of these screws have to come off, and the whole cover plate will come off. Okay, so now we've taken all 3 screws off, and the whole cover plate will come right off the face of the machine. So now we've got the cover plate off, and we have our throat plate off so that we can see all the mechanisms of our needle bar going up and down and how the hook is going to rotate. So what we're going to do at this point is we're actually going to show you hook timing. So we're going to go ahead and turn the machine around so that you can actually see the needle go in rotation. What we're going to do at this point is we're actually going to show where the needle is going to go down into the hook. So I'm turning the machine in counterclockwise rotation. That is, the sewing rotation is counterclockwise. And you can see how the needle goes down into what we call the race area, or what we call the basket. And the basket is not moving, it's being held by the position finger. The position finger actually has a little indentation here, and you'll notice how it rides in that little spot here, and so you can see how I'm rocking it back and forth, and that's keeping the whole basket in place. And that's where the bobbin case goes into. This part right here is actually the hook, and you're seeing the hook spin around, and at this point you can see the hook point right here coming into relationship of the needle. So at this point the hook point is coming right into the scarf of the needle, and as you continue to go by the needle now starts to rise up and the hook point goes completely around, and that is one complete revolution on the needle point versus the hook point. What we're looking at here is the front part of the needle, and I'm pointing to the eye of the needle. This is very important when we're dealing with hook timing. So this again is looking at the front of the needle. Now what we're going to do is we're going to show you a side picture. And you'll notice on the needle now we're looking directly from the side, and you can actually see where the scarf is in the needle. The eye of the needle would be about in this location, and you can kind of literally see where the indentation is, and this is what we call the scarf. This is very important for us as the hook is going to pass through this area for hook timing. Okay. This here is our hook point on the hook. So we're just showing you this so that you can actually see what it looks like and where it is in relation to the basket and the needle positioning finger. But this here is the hook point. You'll notice as I turn the hand wheel it will rotate away from me. But this is the hook point that we're pointing to here. Some individuals, as you're looking at this, you're going to see what we call the needle guard, which is right here, is a little bit confusing when we're talking, but this is what we call the needle guard. The needle guard comes all the way around and guards actually the hook point in relation. But you'll notice right here is actually the hook point. And you'll notice that the hook point is right on the needle. So here we got the needle, and we have the hook point. And you'll notice that this is actually perfect timing in the sewing machine. The eye of the needle is below the hook point, and the hook point is above the eye of the needle. And so if you'll notice as I move the machine backwards, now I'm actually sewing and turning the hook point to where it's coming in relation to the needle. It's actually coming in, and it's going to bypass the scarf, and it's going to go right past the scarf and pick up our thread. We're just showing you this as an illustration that I just backed the hook up again. It's actually coming in rotation, and the eye of the needle is just below the hook point, and it's passing the eye of the needle and picking up the thread. We don't have thread located in it right now. We're just showing you how the proper setting is on the machine. This here is our hook positioning finger that actually comes around that we showed earlier. We're going to go ahead and take this particular part off, and we're literally going to take the hook mechanism out of the machine so that we can show you how to adjust the hook timing from the beginning. So we're going to go ahead and loosen this screw here. By loosening that screw, we'll be able to take that positioning finger out of the machine. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, now that the screw has been removed, we can just go ahead and take the hook positioning finger completely off. We now have 3 screws on the hook shaft. So we have the one here, and as I continue to turn, you'll see the second one, and as I continue to turn, we have the third one. So we're going to loosen all 3 screws, and by loosening these screws and turning the shaft, we'll be able to take the whole hook assembly completely off. So it's loose, and the whole shaft, the whole hook comes out. So there's the hook assembly completely disassembled from the sewing machine. Again, here's now a very good view of the hook point that we were showing you. Another good picture of what we call the basket. And the basket is right here, and that's where the hook positioning finger would go into, and that's what stabilizes that, so the hook is literally able to rotate around the basket, and again, the basket is what holds the bobbin case in place. This is our lower shaft that rotates, that actually drives the hook. And so what we're going to do is we have the hole right in this area, and here is our 3 screws. With those 3 screws, that's what we're going to tighten up onto the shaft. So we're just going to take the hook and turn it and just put it in position, and I just put it all the way into the machine for right now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put the positioning finger back in position so it attaches here. Now what's very important is that when we put the hook positioning finger back in, is that remember that the basket in this position here has to ride into this part here. If it's too far in, you'll notice how that hook basket literally rotates, and that would be a bad situation. We want to make sure that that little slot goes right. Rotate the hook, you'll notice that that positioning finger holds. Go ahead and put the screw on the positioning finger and lock it in place. So now here's the set screw that holds the hook positioning finger in place. Now what I do before I tighten that, I am going to go ahead and take my screwdriver against the hook point or the hook basket and go ahead and just kind of make sure that it's seated in there. And then I just turn the screw until it's tight. Once it's tight, again, we're going to come back and we're going to bring the hook around, and again we're going to make sure that the basket is in place, and now we know the hook is not going to rotate, and I'm just going to kind of finger tighten one of the set screws so that it moves gently, but at least it's not going to move out where this basket is in relation to our hook positioning finger here. Now for hook timing, the way we're going to check this is we want to bring the needle to its lowest position. So we would just turn the hand wheel all the way counterclockwise until the needle continues to come down, and once it's in the lowest position, and you'll notice that we're checking as it continues to come down, and now it starts to do a needle rise. So I'm going to rock it back and forth a little bit, and then I'm going to make sure the needle is in the lowest position. At this point, you can see now where our hook point is up. So what we need to do is we need to adjust that, because this needle point or the hook point is way beyond the actual needle. So what we're going to do is, as you notice, I'm going to grab the hook with my fingers, and I'm going to turn it backwards to bring it completely beyond the needle point. This is very important because all we've done at this point is we've lowered the needle to the lowest position. This here is the needle thread guide right above the eye of the needle. So what I've done is I've just gone ahead and threaded this, and I've come down and I've threaded the eye of the needle. This is going to help us when we lower the needle bar and the needle to see how low we need to go. So at this point I'm going to go ahead and turn the handle wheel counterclockwise to bring the needle to the lowest position. Now once the needle is in the lowest position, I'm going to rock the needle bar back and forth to make sure I'm in the lowest position. So you can kind of see how the needle bar goes down, needle bar goes up. So when I'm in the lowest position, that's how I can check where the proper setting is for the needle bar height. Now if we need to adjust the needle bar height, we need to adjust or loosen this screw right here, and by loosening this screw I can take the whole needle bar mechanism and raise and lower the needle bar. Now why we would need to do that is we need to make sure the needle is in the correct height in the needle bar when it's in the lowest position. So when the needle bar is in the lowest position, we need to make sure it is correct. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to check the eye of the needle coming into the basket. This here is the set screw that we would loosen to raise and lower the needle bar. So I'm just going to back it off just a little bit. I'm going to put my hand on the needle bar where the set screw is for the needle, and you notice that I can rock it back and forth, but with this application I can move the needle bar up and I can move the needle bar down, and that's how we're going to set the proper height. You will notice at this point we have our needle in the lowest position. Now why we're showing you this is the first part we look at to check our hook timing. We want to make sure that the point at the lowest point we can actually see the thread coming out of the eye of the needle here, and we do not want that thread to where it's actually going to pinch up against what we call the basket. So in the lowest position we need to be able to see what we call a wink, or just a little bit of the eye of the needle above it. We can't have it too high, we can't have it too low. It's just kind of almost like the perfect setting. Again, we want to just be able to see the thread coming through. You'll notice that when the needle is in the lowest position, also the point of the hook is about 1/4 of an inch away from the actual needle itself, and that is actually the proper hook timing. But you'll notice now as I turn the needle in clockwise or counterclockwise rotation, you'll notice the needle starts rising up and the hook point is coming in relation to the needle, and that is actually how the machine is actually working. Needle in the lowest position, and then it comes in relation to here. This is just a different angle of the needle in the lowest position where the thread is coming out of the eye of the needle, and seeing where the hook point is in relation to the needle as the needle starts rising up and coming in to the scarf of the needle, that it actually will pick up the thread and it forms the proper loop for it to actually pick the thread up. Again, this is very important that we have the needle bar in the right height. So before we adjust any of the hook timing parts, we want to make sure that the needle is in the lowest position possible before it actually if it gets too low, again, the eye of the needle, we cannot see it. If we have it too high, then the eye of the needle when the hook timing comes in is below that, and we'll show that shortly. What we're looking at here is now we have the needle in the lowest position. And what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to turn the machine hand wheel in counterclockwise rotation and have the needle bar start rising up, and then I'm going to adjust the hook point. You notice how I'm just turning the hook point back to where it's going to be just above the eye of the needle. Now we can do this because once we have the needle bar height set properly, then all we need to do is just rotate the hook until it comes into relationship with the eye of the needle. Now remember, if I bring this thing in to where you can see the thread coming through the eye of the needle at this point. What we're showing you here at this point is the needle bar coming up, and you can see the thread coming through the eye of the needle, and you can see the hook point going right through the eye of the needle. This is telling us that the hook timing is too slow. It should be advanced. If I was to actually move it back even further, you would notice how the needle thread is way above the hook point. Now again, the hook point being right here, and the thread is up on top. And so as it comes around, you can see that it actually misses the thread, and we would actually get skip stitching or breaking at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the hook point back just a little bit. And now you can see where the thread coming through the eye of the needle is at this point. The hook point is coming in relation to the scarf, but the hook point is above the eye of the needle. So at this point, when the hook point is at the scarf, it's literally just above it, and now it's going to pick up the thread, and you can see now how it literally picks the thread up and carries it around the hook point. That is proper hook timing right there. We have to check before we start tightening up our 3 screws on the hook shaft is we need to make sure that our hook point in relation to the hook is nice and close. So what we want to be careful of is, you notice now how I've actually gone away from the hook point and the needle. There is actually a separation there. So what we want to do is we want to pull the hook point out to where it's rubbing right next to the actual needle. We don't want it actually touching. We just want it nice and close to the hook point to the edge of the needle. And you'll notice now as we're coming in, we're right next to the needle. Again, if I was to push the hook in, you can see that there's a gap between it, and if I pull it out, it literally bends or pushes the needle. So we just got to find that happy medium to where it's actually in, to where it's just barely brushing right next to the needle with the hook point, and again, that we're just above the eye of the needle. So right there would be the proper location. Then I'm going to go ahead and just semi-tighten the 1 screw that's facing me to make sure it's okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and just rock it back and forth and just make sure that I'm double checking that my hook point and the eye of the needle is below and it's passing the scarf. And this is the perfect timing. Then I'll just go ahead and turn it, and then I'll go ahead and slowly tighten the 2nd screw, and I'll tighten the 3rd screw, and we have now completed our hook timing on our sewing machine.